Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Infinity Fast Forward webinar series. Appreciate y'all being here this morning. We got a really good topic today. I think something in this industry, it's not if you're going to have an accident, but when, and very often when there is an accident, that could generate a lawsuit. So our topic today is about at the scene of an accident, post-accident procedures. What to do and what not to do. So I think it's a very important topic. It's something that companies should train their drivers on what to do when these accidents do happen. And so once again, I'm glad you all decided to join us today. If you don't mind, jump into the chat and tell us who you are and who you work for and maybe where you're seeing us from. And while you're doing that, I got a couple of folks that I want to introduce to you. Joining us this morning is Mark Ray. Some of you, if you've been in our webinars in the past, Mark's a regular on our program. He is a truck transportation executive for at least 35 years. I know Mark for a long time. He's a director of safety, is a licensed CDL, CMV inspector. I don't know of anybody in the industry that has more experience in what we're going to talk about today than Mark. By the way, folks, you should know this is going to be a replay of a webinar we did on this topic not very long ago. I also want to introduce you all to Becky Insall. Becky is one of our national account reps. She's an experienced person in training and a client specialist. So welcome, Mark and Becky.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Welcome. So what we're going to do is let you all look at this webinar. Please feel free to type in the chat box, or there's a Q&A space down there. If you have a question along the line, just type it in there. And when we've finished looking at the webinar, we'll try to answer any of the questions that y'all may have through the course of the recording here. So if you all are ready, we're going to start the webinar.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Infinity webinar series today. We have a fantastic topic and guest speaker. Our topic for the day is at the scene, post-accident procedures, what to do and what not to do. We've got joining us Mr. Keith Long, the transportation nerd, a subject matter expert that's going to give us some insight on his experiences and how we can communicate what to do at the scene with our drivers, as well as what to do at the scene behind the scenes as administrative staff. I want to make sure that we can cover a couple of real important facts. Is the majority of the commercial truck accidents are the critical reason belongs to the car, not the truck. The unfortunate is the ability to defend and present that in a format that a defense attorney can defend the case. And it's very frustrating when it's clearly a non-preventable, but you're unable to make those determinations, and some of the things that are done immediately at the scene, post-accident procedures, can certainly help with defending that lawsuit. So without anything else, Keith, thank you for joining us today.
Yep, absolutely. Glad to be here and super excited about this topic. So there's a lot here to chew on.
Fantastic. Why don't you just kick it off and tell us about what some of our audience can do and not do immediately post-accident.
Great. Well, and you really hit it on the head there, right? According to the ATA, so they did a study at the end of 2021, or concluded a study, and found that 80% of accidents involving commercial motor vehicle and cars, the cause of the accident can be attributed to the driver of the car or the passenger vehicle rather than the truck driver, right? So 80%, and that's why here, we can say that a majority of these cases are defensible, right? And if you're not defending yourself on these cases, you're wasting time and you're leaving yourself out there. But as you said, it is critical what you do in those moments after the accident, right? We're really in, and we've probably heard the term quite a bit, but we're in the age of nuclear verdicts when it comes to truck transportation, right? These are those high awarded cases, high jury awarded cases that may surpass what may be reasonable or rational for the accident itself. So, and you probably see it all the time if you're in any major city, right? You take a trip down the interstate and you see the big signs, right? I'll get you millions. My last case, I made 10 million, or you name it. They're going to promise big numbers. And for any lawyer, they're going out after these cases, and the goal is, right, if you don't have your facts straight, if you didn't do your due diligence, after that accident, then there's opportunity there for, well, us to pull at the heartstrings of the jury, right, or turn this into a sympathy case rather than a facts, what actually happened. They play on the idea of big bad truck drivers, and that's, when we talk about this 80% statistic, that's just not it.
Yeah. And those facts post accident, they get a little more hard to focus and hard to find as the crash or as the case ages. Is that correct?
Right, absolutely. The farther we get away from it, a lot of that information is disappearing, right? There's, we talk about super important things, and we'll mention this here in a little bit, but the ECM on a truck, right? That electronic control module that tells the entire story of what's going on with that vehicle. If we're not getting that information right away, it may very well be gone when you go to look for it months down the road, or with the way cases can go now, even years down the road, right?
Yes, and I'll just the reality of these nuclear verdicts is real. I've certainly been involved in some, and they are alive and well. Right,
and it's one or two missing things that create that opportunity for an attorney to hold on to, right? And really, sway the jury and just a little bit, right? So we'll talk about some of those things here. So really, how do we prove what happened, and how do we prove that we were in the right? And this all starts with, one, making sure we're doing what we need to after the accident, but two, making sure you have the right person representing you when you're out there, right? We're not just going to get any lawyer. We're going to get somebody that has experience in the industry, that's been in and around it, and might as well be their specialty, right? A truck transportation lawyer. Are you using dash cams? You should be, especially in this day and age. At least an external camera, but if you're using internal cameras, those also tell the story of, if we're saying our driver was in the right, then we've got that visual that shows our driver was hands at 10 and 2, not distracted, maintaining our lane, where we needed to be, when we needed to be there, right? So at the scene, right, we want to be sure that we're any witness statements, seek out and look for any public cameras. If you don't have a dash camera or anything like that on your trucks, a lot of times you've got cameras in the area, local businesses nearby, gas stations. If your accident happened at an intersection, right, you may have intersection cameras. And a lot of times what we've seen is even passerbys might have a camera on their vehicle, right, that are willing to submit that.
There's also public cameras at intersections and at light poles are everywhere, aren't they?
Yep, absolutely.
Now on the witnesses, I know I've had this happen where you had a statement and you get down the road and you begin to put the defense together, and you can't find that witness.
Right. Yep, absolutely. So it pays, one, to get that witness statement, but two, to keep up with them and keep track with them, right? right? Make sure you've got a foundation of contact with them, especially if it's a key witness, right? Somebody that was really there when it happened. It's important that you don't lose contact with them, because that may very well be the foundation of that case surviving. Get with a good accident reconstruction subject matter expert, right? Somebody that is well versed in doing this, because their goal and their job is to take all of the facts of the accident and put together a retelling of the event, right? You don't want to rely on just the accident description that we get from the police report. It pays to also have somebody look at it third party and reconstruct it as well, right? We also kind of get a play-by-play and an opportunity to determine what was going on at the moment that the accident happened. And again, always get that ECM data, right? Don't let that fall by the wayside. That should be one of the first things that you're doing, right? If that truck's, ending up being towed away from the scene or anything like that, need to make sure you've got somebody on the receiving end of that to get that ECM data. That should be top and first priority, aside from other things that might be going on at the scene. There's a lot of things that as a driver, we need to be paying attention to, right? There's a lot of things directly after that accident, those first critical minutes after that accident, that a driver should be paying attention to and be ready for. So at the scene of an accident, right? Let's get in the mind of a driver in the accident. What happens? We're naturally, like anybody, we're panicked, right? Your heart's racing. It's
adrenaline's flowing.
That's it, exactly. And if somebody's not telling you what to do in those moments, it's easy to forget what you're supposed to do. Or if you don't have a checklist right in front of you, it's easy to forget what you should be doing. So first and foremost, I recommend having a checklist in that truck, a laminated checklist that driver knows where to go to, whether that's pinned to the dash or attached to the visor, right? Something that driver can follow step by step every single time. And you should really have company training on it, right? Don't just rely on an accident happening to hope that they follow that standard operating procedure, right? Practice makes perfect, right? We train for all kinds of things, and this should also be one of those things that you're training for. So you can see here, in the event of an accident, right? Set the brakes, turn on the four-way flashers, and as the CDL manual says, right, secure the area, right? And so when we're talking about securing a scene, the way that a driver does that is placing out those emergency triangles within the first 10 minutes, contacting the authorities, and making sure, right, or checking on other parties, that is, at the scene. If we're not looking at, I think in general, it's important one to note here too, that we do reach out to the authorities for any accident, right? It's important that you do so, unless it's your driver and they hit a cement block in a parking lot, right? Or they did some sort of landscaping, we'll call it that. But if any other parties are involved, it's important that we get, the police involved, or some sort of law enforcement, motor vehicle enforcement division, an official person who can be there to respond to the scene and take record of the scene.
So you recommend actually asking the other party, do you need medical attention? And if their answer is yes, you 911 them in, but check on the other party on their health and well-being.
Right. And again, this really does fall into the, I guess, best way to put it, right? We're not going to intervene, right? That's not our job. We're leaving that up to the professionals, right? But it is important to assess that scene and understand if there is anything critical. But regardless, we should be getting official help on the way.
Yes, we should show sincerity and compassion. But the other thing I think is important, we need to assume the other party has their iPhone on, is recording everything that's going on. So going to the window and using some vulgar language and making accusations probably is not a good idea.
Right, absolutely. Professionalism is key here, and it should always be, at the first of mind in these situations. It's important to check on other parties, but I've heard a driver in an accident say, is anybody dead? Well, that's probably not the response that we want to go to the window with. I think that's what you're talking about there, Mark, is how we assess the incident. We're not there to offer aid or anything like that. We're there to make sure that everybody is okay, and that help is on the way.
We're not going to try that case on the side of the road.
That's right. In general, we always say do not admit fault, right? And the reason being there is because we have no clue what the other factors are in that accident, right? You have no clue what else was going on. If you're rear-ended at an intersection and the light was green in front of you, you might say you're impeding traffic, but you don't know that driver behind you could have been on their cell phone. They could have been speeding. They could be inebriated. There's all kinds of factors that go into an accident, right? So best thing to do is to stick to the facts and know where you were when the accident happened, right? We should be calling into our company the moment it happens. Right after we've contacted the authorities, we should be calling our company and letting them know we've been involved in an accident, so that the company can start that proper chain, right? That proper order of operations to get what they need for the accident, and to make sure that you're doing what you need to at the scene as a driver, right? So, if anybody's injured, if anybody's cited or anything like that, as a company, there's things that we need to make sure happen so that we're covering ourselves in the event that this does have some legal ramifications. So, we talk about, let's say, post-accident drug and alcohol. That's one of those critical factors that if you didn't get that taken care of in the allotted amount of time, right? That's the type of thing that then we go to court later on, and it's a non-defense point, right? You can say, well, was your driver inebriated? Was your driver this or that? We don't know because we don't have this evidence here. So we leave the door open for suspicion. Right? If you don't know the rules and regulations, right, you should be understanding and knowing CSR 382-303, right, that defines when and where, or in the event of an accident, what should be happening for post-accident drug and alcohol. If people were towed away from the scene, if people were injured at the scene, and the windows in which those things need to be done.
Now, this is a pretty long list. Let me just ask you a tough question. Is it trainable for a motor carrier to be able to train their drivers on what to do at the scene?
It is
trainable in it?
Yep, absolutely it is, right? There's because it, like we said here, if I just threw this list at you and you'd been involved in an accident and you'd never looked at this except for your break the glass moment, right, then you're going to have a problem, right? You're probably not going to follow through with everything that you need to, even though it's right there on paper. We have to train to it. If in an office building, we train for things like emergencies and fires, right? We have standard operating procedures that we follow that we're required to train on. It should be the same for our drivers that we have out in the field.
Yes, and I've heard this over and over when you get to the deposition stage. Nobody told me to do any of these things, and that's a preventable. That needs to be corrected.
Right, absolutely. Pictures are a big one.
Yeah.
Right. Make sure that you document. Get pictures that support and tell the story. Pictures should have trailer numbers, tractor numbers in them. They should be far enough back that they tell us the story of the accident. We get a lot of these, and I'll show you a good one here. A lot of these that look like this.
Yeah.
And what does that tell you, right? We know that there's damage, disabling damage, but this doesn't tell us any other part of the story. And you get these all too often, right? We're not taking pictures so that we can send it to our claims adjuster and determine when I can get my car into the next shop, right? We want pictures that tell the story, because at the end of the day, you may very well have a party that has no clue what happened except for the facts that are set in front of them, the pictures and the story that's been written out. So a more appropriate view, right, looks like this, right? We can tell how close we were to the curb or any other object. We can see in the back of this picture that we're just on the other side of an intersection. We get the license plate, we get the make of the vehicle, we get what lane position the vehicle's in. There's a whole lot more to this story now. But another opportunity then would be to take a picture on the other side, right, out and around. Most important thing to do, though, is make sure you're not endangering yourself, stepping out in traffic or anything like that to get these pictures. That should be a no-brainer, but absolutely needs to be said. Another good one here, a good attempt, right? But there's not, we don't get a whole lot of the story here. And you can see we've got maybe a whole trailer number there in the corner, but that is one that you'll see, right? We'll get a partial of a number or something like that, right? If we don't see where it begins and where it ends, that doesn't tell the whole story.
Picture of that license plate's very important.
Correct.
And I would assume that would include any eyewitnesses if you can get a picture of their license plate.
Absolutely, right? Because that ultimately furthers your ability to reach out to them or stay in contact with them, right? So here's that regulation, right? Post-accident drug and alcohol testing. Again, extremely important, right? This the CSR tells it all. So you should be familiar with what to do at a scene, what to do post-accident, and you should know what the FMCSA says that we should be doing, what rules we should be following. Because failure to do so here, it looks like we chose not to. So for the company, right, this is the receiving end of that phone call, right? Things we need to be paying attention to, right? What's the time of day? What's the driver's information? What's the driver ID? Truck number, location, other parties involved and their information, right? Are there any injuries? Have we called the authorities? Are tows needed? Has anybody been towed yet? Have officials responded to the scene yet? Did you get a police report? Because we should be. And were you cited? That's another big one there. Especially, at an accident, we can be cited and not be in the wrong. And that decision can come later. But if you're cited, that's also something we can go back and data queue, right? There's an opportunity there if we're at fault for a specific reason. We talk about those CSA categories, crash, right? This is where that comes in. Post-accident.
I would assume hazardous spills would also be an important item.
Right, absolutely. If you are in hazardous transportation, that's a whole nother thing there, right? We should be looking at our guidebook and determining based upon what we have, how we need to handle the incident. And you should also be communicating with the authorities what is being hauled on that vehicle, right? And then to further that point, right, if we go back to what the driver should be doing in that case, right, that ERG, the emergency response guide, tells the driver, right, how far they may need to block off an area depending on, what chemicals or what products are on that vehicle and the type of things that they should be carrying with them in the event that happens. So that really sets off a whole secondary chain to this, that whole nother set of steps that our driver should know and should be ready to follow. And as a company, we should be practicing with them if we're in that mode of the industry. So like we've been talking about here, Mark, it really all comes down to preparation and practice, right? Ultimately, at the end of it, if this goes to trial or is going to, we need to prepare for discovery and deposition, right? We should be practicing. If you've got a good truck transportation lawyer, they're going to be putting you through deposition practice. Be prepared to block off your calendar for some time there, because that does take a while, especially if you've been through it, you understand there. But you have to be ready for it, and you should also be well and familiar with things like your company's training materials, company policy and handbook. The one key thing right here is, if I'm defending an accident that happened 3-4 years ago, the company policy and training materials at that time that were provided are what you're defending, right? You're not, it's not current place and time. So it's important to be familiar with training materials that would have been handed out at that time. It's important to understand and be knowledgeable of the company policies that were in place at that time and what materials you put out at that time. Because just as much as you're going to know it, you can guarantee that the other party, right, the other lawyer, is going to know it just as well as you do. Absolutely important to retain hours of service records, wherein the ECM tells us the entire story of the truck and what happened in an incident. The hours of service tells us the story of the driver and what happened prior to the incident, right? Sleeping habits, driving habits, right? You can look in there pre-accident. You might be determining, potential for fatigue. You might be determining, well, was this driver off for a while before they got back on the road? There's a whole lot that this hours of service tells. It also tells, right, were they doing their pre and post trips the way that they should have been? Or are they inspecting their vehicle? Is that notated? Because if a driver's not paying attention to those things, right, the argument could be made, what else aren't they paying attention to? Could this also have been a contributing factor to the accident, right?
Yeah, and a lawsuit can be filed well past the 6-month deadline for retaining hours of service. But if you're not able to provide hours of service to a judge, that's hard to explain. That is hard to explain.
Correct. And as a company, part of your critical accident review process, right? And you should be doing one, is making sure that you have those records and you have them retained, right? That should be done shortly after the accident happens. Right?
And then you've got to almost assume nearly any wreck is subject to litigation in today's plaintiff's attorney's world.
Correct. And then, when we go back to that percentage, right? 80%, right? 80% of these accidents are the fault of the operator of a passenger car and not the truck driver. Not only should you expect, these to go to trial, but you should also be ready to defend them, because more than likely with a statistic like that, you're going to have success. Maintain records. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to comment on the prepare and practice. I do know some insurance companies that now, as a condition of being a member of the insurance pool, and that they actually have simulated crashes, simulated depositions, simulated discovery to make sure that you are defendable, becoming a little bit more common all the time in the insurance world.
Right. Absolutely.
Probably a very good practice.
Right. Maintenance records, right? That's another one that we really want to retain and pay attention to. If our vehicle was involved in an accident where, we don't even have to say that where the brakes went out or something along those lines, but you can guarantee that regardless, things that are going to come into play are going to be those maintenance records, right? Were proper preventative maintenance cycles in order? When's the last time the truck had been, serviced? When's the last time the trailer had been serviced, right? It's not just the truck that's in the accident, it's also the equipment that's attached to it. Maintaining the driver qualification file, right? Everything that we have from when that driver started to their entire journey with us, right? Their MVR extract, pre-employment history. Do they have patterns of maybe incidents or accidents? CSA comes into play in that. Do they have any points or anything like that sitting on them, either pre-employment or during employment with our company, that could be red flags or leading causes or possible findings and determinations that would have told us that this accident might happen at some point in time in the future. Because if they are there, those things are going to be brought up.
Absolutely.
Pre-employment drug screening and any drug screens that were performed under employment, right? Any random drug screenings that were performed under employment. And I think that kind of ties in. Same thing with the DQ file, right? These are things that we want to retain and we want to have ready, and that should happen, right? All of this should be happening right after the accident. They should all be a chain reaction process for the company. We should know that these are things that we need to have ready right away. You don't want to have, you don't want to be scrambling because we just found out that this is going to trial, and now we need to figure out where all the puzzle pieces are.
So Keith, I do have one question here. There's a lot of great information. Some of it's back office information that needs to be done, behind the desk and behind the computer screen. A lot of in the cab with the driver. I know Vertical Alliance, Infinity Workforce is online training a way to get this content out to your driving staff?
You bet it is. Not only is it, a good way to build these trainings and get them in front of your drivers, but we can also check to make sure that training's been completed. And better yet, when we do go to trial, we have a training record that we can print out and say, here's the past 6 months to a year of the courses that this driver took, right? That shows more than anything, right? Versus a driver that's not taking training, or we can't pull up records of that, right? So
yes, and we will
invaluable.
offer an opportunity for a free demonstration for all our clients at the end here to sign up for a free demonstration. But it appears a lot of this is customized for a specific carrier. Something might apply to a concrete truck, might be different than a oil field truck, that might be different than an over the road truck, and it's a lot. Do you recommend customizing the content that gets delivered?
I do, right? We should create relatable content, right? You're one, if you're in a specialized industry that specific or company specific content is important, but two, relatable content is important for retention, right? Your drivers are going to retain that information better if they feel like they can relate to it rather than a broad generalization.
Now, do you and the Transportation Nerd provide those services?
I do, absolutely. I created many training videos to date. I've put together about 130 different training videos on various topics. And it's something that, we can work with a company and what resources I have available and that specific company, and put something together that's effective, that they can get in front of their drivers. And hopefully they're using Infinity to deliver that content.
Well, I mean, it's easy for us to agree that we lose the opportunity to gather a lot of this information immediately following an accident, and something else to have our driver prepared and trained on what to do at the scene, and how do we get that? How do we exchange that information? Is super important.
Correct.
And again, we never know how an individual will react under stress and adrenaline flow, but at least the opportunity to train them on what to do and maybe what not to do is something that certainly can turn a minor preventable accident into a catastrophic nuclear verdict.
That's correct. It's
a fine line.
It pays to do your due diligence. And that critical hour, we'll call it that critical hour after the accident, and what happens determines probably the outcome for many, many months afterwards.
Wow, and again, just kind of rephrase or to reestablish the fact that the majority of motor vehicle accidents that have commercial trucks and passenger cars, the critical reason belongs to the passenger cars. The challenge for us in the commercial truck industry is, can you prove it? What can you do to absolutely prove without anybody's second guessing it wasn't our fault? And if you wait 6 months, 2 months, 9 months down the road, the window's gone.
Correct. And I think you said it right there. Not only is the question, can you prove it, but the answer is you can prove it, right?
Can prove it. Yes.
You've got to put in the work, and you've got to make sure you're doing it right, because it does pay off.
Well, that was some really good information. I don't think I can stress enough. I've had an occasion to talk to quite a few attorneys that defend trucking companies, and invariably, this is one of the top topics that they have to make sure that you're defendable. And if you're not doing these things, it creates a huge problem for your defense attorney to put forth a good case and get you out from under some of these things. A couple of things that I heard in there at the scene of an accident. One of the things one of our attorneys talks about all the time when you talk about taking pictures is make sure, and we showed it in the video, make sure you take pictures of the license plates of anybody that might have witnessed it, because like Mark said, you can go years down the road before these trials would ever take place. And our attorney says if you have a license plate, they can generally locate the person that was at that scene that day. Without that information, it gets very, very difficult to do that. I would also say that based on what we hear from our lawyers out there, what happens at the scene, the behavior of your driver can make the difference. In a lot of cases, it might make millions of dollars worth of difference just on how that is handled when these bad crashes happen. I think, Mark, do you have any comments based on having heard yourself again?
Just one thing. I think Keith made a very good analogy. We all participated in fire drills. We've all participated in active shooter drills, and I think it's prudent that we consider doing a post-accident drill. It's practice, and in the absence of that, anything can happen.
So a couple of things. If any of you have questions, by the way, just jump in the chat and put them in there. We do have something that we're going to give you an opportunity to take home with you today. I believe we have a couple of documents that if we can pop them up on the screen here, I think you'll be able to download those. That I think it's one document's about what to do at the scene of an accident, and I believe the other one is what not to do. So if we don't get those popped up on here, we'll certainly make sure that we send all of y'all that were joining us today a copy of that. Yeah, there they are. So if you all want to just click on those, I think you can download those real quickly, and you'll have access to, I think, some good checklist type pieces that hopefully you'll be able to use in your company. But, once again, folks, these are trainable things, what to do in an accident. Mark said it a couple of times. You have to practice these things. Practice depositions, practice gathering all that information. You may be surprised at what you find when you start that process. And what I would say is if you struggle with what happens there, maybe that tells you where you should start, and make sure that, we're as buttoned up as possible and as defendable and insurable as we can be. Any other comments, Mark, Becky? All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. If any of you have some interest in hearing a little bit more about what we can do and how we can help you get this information out to your drivers and make sure that you've got it documented and those types of things, then we'll absolutely reach out to you and tell you what we have, and hopefully it's something that can help in your company. So if there aren't any other questions, thank you all for joining us today. It was great to have you with us. And one thing I do want to mention, somebody write this on your calendar. We're going to be sponsoring another webinar on Thursday, the 17th at 10 a.m. We have a fellow named Jeffrey Short. He's a VP at ATRI, the American Transportation Research Institute. And he's going to talk about the impacts of legalized marijuana in the trucking industry. And this is a big issue. So mark that on your calendar. You should be getting an invite from us. I think it would be well worth your time to attend that one, because Mr. Short is the one that recently published their definitive research in that area. So once again, thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you on a webinar in the future. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.